This all happened less than a month ago. I'm a senior in high school, and I've lived in Nevada my whole life. There's not a lot to do here, but one thing my friends and I have always been into is urban exploring. We'd search for abandoned buildings, old service tunnels, defunct malls, anything that seemed forgotten. We'd climb through broken fences, take pictures, sometimes sneak up to roofs, or venture down into basements. It wasn't about causing trouble or doing anything illegal. It was just about the vibe. Of all of us, Charles was always the one to find the weirdest places. He's kind of the quiet, mysterious guy in our group. He'd show up with locations we'd never heard of, and half the time, I didn't even ask how he found them. One day, Charles sent us a screenshot from some sketchy Instagram account. The account had low followers, blurry photos, and creepy comments under its posts. The caption on one post read something like, "Dozens of abandoned mine shafts in the Mojave Desert, if you know where to look." According to Charles, he'd been in contact with the account owner, and they'd given him some spots to check out. That was all it took. Charles was obsessed, so that Saturday, it was just me, Charles, and our other friend, James. I had a Wrangler, perfect for off-roading in the desert, so we took that. We didn't have a specific address, just a general area, and a pin drop somewhere in the middle of the Mojave. The spot Charles had marked was deep in the desert, far from anything. We turned off the main road about half an hour earlier than we should have, and the dirt path we were on didn't even look like a road anymore. We drove for what felt like forever. No signs, no structures, just endless sand and rock. I kept checking my phone even though I knew we didn't have service. James was getting more and more frustrated. He started telling Charles this whole thing was a waste of time and that he'd been scammed by some random account. But Charles, being Charles, insisted we keep looking. He's always been stubborn about navigation, so I figured I'd indulge him for a while longer. Eventually, just when we were about to call it quits, James spotted something off to the right. At first, it looked like more rocks and sand, but as we got closer, we saw it. A half-collapsed wooden structure built into the side of a slope. Part of the entrance had caved in, but there was still a dark hole behind the support beams. It wasn't huge, but it was definitely man-made. Definitely a mine shaft. Charles didn't say anything at first. He just pulled out his phone, opened the offline map he downloaded when we still had service, and dropped a pin. Then he turned to James and said, "Told you." James grumbled something about Charles just getting lucky, but even I had to admit it was kind of crazy. We'd been driving around in circles for hours, and we'd actually found one of the shafts. I parked the Wrangler a few yards away from the entrance on a flat patch of dirt, and we all got out and geared up. Charles even brought masks for us to wear. We walked up to the mine, and it looked even sketchier up close. Charles picked up a rock and tossed it in. We waited, then heard it clang 3 times, then nothing. The shaft was deep. Charles looked back at us and said, "If we trip on the way down, we're probably dead." We started the descent. Luckily, the shaft wasn't a straight drop. It sloped down at a steep angle, but not steep enough that we had to climb hand over hand. The ground was loose and uneven, and there were old wooden beams lining parts of the wall. Surprisingly, they seemed pretty sturdy. The deeper we went, the colder it got, and the quieter it became. It was eerie down there. We couldn't even see any light from the entrance anymore. Eventually, we made it to what felt like the bottom. The shaft leveled out and opened into a wider tunnel that branched off in several directions. It looked just how you'd expect. Old support beams every few yards, rusted rails half buried in dirt, and a thick layer of dust on everything. There were scraps of wood and metal scattered around, probably parts of old carts or tools. It smelled kind of stale in there, if that makes sense. Honestly, I didn't realize how much of a blessing the masks were until then. We picked a tunnel and started walking. We weren't really looking for anything specific, just exploring. The place didn't seem to have much of interest. It looked like it had been mostly cleaned out of anything valuable. But then, we heard something. It was faint at first, somewhere further down the tunnel. It sounded like something being dragged. At first, I thought I imagined it, but I looked over and saw that Charles had stopped too. James motioned for us to turn off our flashlights. We did, and then we just stood there in the dark, listening. The sound came again. It was a scraping noise. Metal, maybe wood, being dragged along the ground. It was hard to tell with the echo, but whatever it was, it sounded like it was getting closer. We stood there, listening, for what felt like an eternity, maybe 30 seconds, maybe a full minute. The scraping kept getting louder. It didn't sound super close, but that didn't make it any less terrifying. Then James accidentally flicked his flashlight on, then off again. I wanted to strangle him. The scraping stopped, and everything went silent. Then, out of nowhere, there was this loud metallic clang from deep in the tunnel, like whatever had been dragged had been dropped, and right after that came the most bone-chilling scream I'd ever heard. It wasn't human. It was something else entirely. Without thinking, we turned and ran. We didn't care how loud we were. I've never run faster in my life. I could hear footsteps behind me, and my heart was pounding in my chest. I thought I was going to have a panic attack. I was in the back trying to keep up when I tripped on something. One of my shoes came off, and I struggled to stay upright. I didn't have time to go back for it, so I just kept running, ignoring the pain in my foot. Charles and James had already reached the incline and were climbing up. I practically threw myself up the stairs. Climbing those stairs half barefoot was the most painful thing I've ever experienced. No exaggeration, it was excruciating. I kept getting splinters, but the adrenaline kept me going. If not for that, I don't think I would have made it out. By the time I reached the surface, my foot was wrecked. James and Charles had to help me get to the car. I couldn't drive like that, so James jumped in the driver's seat. I barely got the door closed before he floored it. We weren't sticking around to find out if we were being followed. We drove in silence all the way to the nearest hospital. I thought the pain would make me pass out. I ended up needing a tetanus shot, and even after all the splinters were removed and my wounds cleaned up, I couldn't walk properly for days. A few days later, once I could walk without limping too badly, James mentioned he'd dropped his wallet somewhere near the shaft. Probably when he was helping me to the car. He hadn't said anything at the time, but now he figured it was worth going back to the entrance. We drove back out there using the pin Charles had saved. Obviously, James's wallet was nowhere to be found, but we did find something else. My shoe. It was sitting a few feet from the mine entrance. I cautiously walked over and picked it up. It was torn up, like something had bitten into it. There were teeth marks in the leather, and entire chunks were missing. We didn't stick around any longer. None of us could come up with a rational explanation. You might be quick to say it was some homeless person living down there. But if that was the case, how the hell had they survived for so long? There was no food down there, no water, nothing to sustain anyone, let alone someone who could bite through a shoe. Charles tried reaching out to that Instagram account again, but the person never responded. It's going to be a long time before any of us do any urban exploring in the desert again. I've always been the rugged type, outdoorsy, low maintenance. A vacation to me isn't some all-inclusive resort on a tropical island. It's a camping or fishing trip, plain and simple. Thankfully, my girlfriend of 6 months, Tiki, shares that same love for nature. Honestly, it's probably one of the main reasons we hit it off in the first place. A couple weeks ago, we decided to mix things up. Instead of heading to the mountains or forest, we made plans to camp in the desert for a few days. Neither of us had experienced that kind of vast, silent, dry isolation before. It felt like something we had to try at least once. The stargazing was a big part of the draw, too. Both of us have always been into it. Even when we first started dating, we'd drive past the edge of town, lay back on the truck's hood, and just watch the sky for hours. So when we found a spot out in the middle of nowhere, far from any town, completely free of light pollution, it was an easy yes. I found the place online. It was remote, but legal to camp on. No amenities, just open land, fire rings, and sky. Sounded perfect. We packed up early Friday morning, loaded the truck, and hit the road. The last hour of the drive was down a seemingly endless dirt road. No houses, no people. Honestly, that was half the appeal. We reached the site in the late afternoon. Not a soul in sight, just us and the desert. The first couple nights were everything we hoped for. Warm days, cool nights, crystal clear skies. We sat by the fire, shared a couple drinks, passed a joint back and forth, talked about nothing and everything. No distractions, no schedules, just us. We even fooled around in the tent a bit, part of the fun, right? But both nights we heard something strange, not close, but far out in the distance. It was this low, drawn-out sound, like a howl or a moan. It didn't sound human, but it didn't quite sound like any animal I knew either. The first night, we both paused. Tiki gave me this look like, "Did you hear that too?" I nodded. We ended up laughing it off. I said it was probably a coyote or mountain lion. She agreed. Same thing happened the second night, almost at the same time. We chalked it up to desert wildlife. Unfamiliar sounds in an unfamiliar place. A little creepy, sure, but nothing we couldn't brush off. Then came the third night. I woke up to footsteps just outside the tent. Soft at first, just a few crunches on dry dirt. Slow, steady, not like an animal. My heart stopped. I held my breath, listening. I didn't dare move. I wanted to grab the flashlight to wake Tiki up, but I was frozen. My body locked up completely. The footsteps stopped just a few feet from the tent. Then silence. I stared up at the roof of the tent, barely blinking, waiting, listening. Whoever it was, whatever it was, didn't move again. And then, click. That sharp sound of a lighter being flicked. A small orange glow flickered through the tent wall. Waist high, a few feet away, whoever was out there held the flame steady, then slowly started waving it around. My body still wouldn't move. I just watched. Then the flame grew. Fast. Way too fast. It went from a flicker to a full-on glow, like they'd lit a torch. And then, without warning, they dropped it. I heard the thump as it hit the ground, and a second later the side of the tent burst into light. The heat hit instantly. That finally snapped me out of it. I shook Dickie awake, and she immediately realized what was happening. We scrambled, grabbing what we could and tossing it outside. I don't even know if we got everything. Dickie dumped one of our water jugs on the fire. I stomped out everything I could. Somehow, we managed to get it under control, but half the tent was ruined. I grabbed the flashlight and scanned the darkness around us, looking for whoever had done this. But there was no one. At least, no one we could see. Dickie started packing fast and I helped her. We had no idea which direction the drug was in. No landmarks, pitch dark. We picked a direction and just started walking fast. Maybe 10 minutes later, we heard it again. That same scream we'd heard the first 2 nights, but louder now, closer, longer, like something was in pain. And then another scream and another, all from different directions, all behind us. It was clear there wasn't just one of them. I didn't say anything, just grabbed Dickie's arm and picked up the pace. By some miracle, we found the truck. We tossed our stuff in, didn't even try to organize it, and I floored it. Couldn't go too fast. Those roads were brutal. But I didn't stop until we hit the main highway. Dickie held it together, but I could tell she wanted to cry. I did a terrible job consoling her. We called the police later, filed a report. But all I could think about was this. If I hadn't been a light sleeper, Dickie and I might have burned alive out there in the middle of the desert. That trip changed everything. And it's important you understand that, because it's part of the reason what I'm about to say next weighs so heavily.